Hey everyone, very good morning. Charles here, Monday the 27th of July, and it is 20 to 6 here in Milan. Very good morning to all of you. So, the good news is, pretty much, if you were able to have a look at yesterday's breakdown, the market has done as we had forecasted in terms of those breaks or structures that we wanted. Funnily enough, price has come into the EMAs and rejecting them, particularly the 4-hour 50 EMA. So it's not all doom and gloom, however, because on the 15-minute time frame, it does look quite nice. So we'll go through that and see exactly what we have today. Everything, as a heads up, looks okay to good to great. So we'll go through the best of the best and we'll see what the favorites are for the day. And of course, we'll look to color coordinate them. So I hope you're all well and welcome to a new week. So the DXY, as we mentioned yesterday, last week's weekly candle closed pretty bullish in comparison to the weeks prior. Nevertheless, we did, in my opinion, I've got two trails of thought. We've closed to the highs of the range, where of course we'll be expecting expecting price to roll back towards the downside within that weekly range as we got here. Alternatively, as a result of this being, we could call it a new high, we'd still be looking for that pullback to be followed by another higher high. However, with that said, the daily time frame is really what's pushing me to look for a bit more of a sell-off on the DXY, simply because of that daily order block we have to the left hand side here. So after this high, I was looking for that higher low, for that higher high continuation. We actually don't have that higher high continuation. We can see that by the weekly time frame. That although this was a weekly, last week was a previous weekly bullish candle close, we didn't actually close above any of the wicks. So therefore, on a daily time frame, it's very clearly represented that we have not made that higher high, long story short. With that said, this daily order block is still being respected to the downside. And as I said yesterday, I will remain slightly bearish short term on the DXY until we do see a daily candle close above that daily order block. With that said, to support that, I'm still yet to really see, or we are still yet to really see, price action fully retest that daily 50 MA. Now, with that said, looking at previous history, we've tested it once, we've pushed off, we've come back towards it, but we haven't tested it, we've still made a high. So what I'm reluctant to do is, well, I do back myself, but when you're looking at this, the question is, well, is this the test to be followed by a higher high? But of course, we're looking for ways in which to prove or negate what we think. And we have this order block here suggesting that price is going to move towards the downside and then towards the downside where perhaps towards that daily 50 May back towards the lows of the range. Or if we're wrong about the range and price is stepping up, which we can clearly see on the 4-hour time frame, we have more of a resistance hold up where we can anticipate price to bounce potentially off the 4-hour 50 MA and dip into that 4-hour order block and then look to make that higher high based on the 4-hour time frame. So those both of those trails of thoughts I think make quite good sense. And then when we look across the cross pairs to understand what that would mean for us, it also makes sense there. So I'll go through that in just one moment. Right, so yesterday we had these key structure points placing on the market, and as a result of the gap, as we said, we take the weekend breakdowns with a pinch of salt, but it's still higher time frame is pretty much unchanged. In fact, it is unchanged in its entirety. It's just the lower time frames, to be honest, which have really given us that break of structure, and price has actually pushed into those positions where we really would have anticipated them to go down towards. So coming straight out of the bat, I'm looking for either or. DXY strength coming from this 4-hour order block, as we've said, that trail of thought is in relation to higher highs and lows, followed by a potential higher high. If we are incorrect about the range, therefore, what would we be expecting here, or what would we be expecting to do if we were going to trade the DXY? Be looking for confirmation of some sort. More than likely, it would be a 15-minute type of confirmation, whether that's a 15-minute bullish engulfing candle order block followed by a lower time frame break of structure, or a lower time frame break of structure on the DXY to potentially then go towards the cross pair to look for that higher degree of entry criteria for, let's say, a short on GU, EU, or AU as a result of DXY strength, or in fact US dollar CAD longs. for example. So I think either way, you can look for, let's say, if price pushes up towards this area, I think that'll look very nice as a result of course, that break now coming back up for the short position on the DXY, or alternatively, as we speak, prices, I mean, we can say it's closer to the long position on the DXY for DXY strength to come out of the market. So it all looks really nice, I'd say, with both trails of thought. When, of course, there is two trails of thought, we can quite understand why we need to have confirmation in both directions. So that's where we are on the DXY. So what I'm going to do is place an alert with price coming into that 4 hour order block just to see if price is going to respect it. And then what I'll do, have price come back up towards this area to fill that gap. While we're talking about the gap fill, of course, that indeed is a confluence for price to want to revert back up towards these highs. So if we're taking, let's say, a long position on the DXY to look for DXY strength, US dollar strength, we do also have that confluence. The price will look to gravitate towards that gap fill back into the session high, which is now confirmed as a result of price actually breaking down from those lows. And then what's nice about the session high is more often than not, in fact, 100% of the time, if I'm seeing a gap in the market, I'm not going to use the order block that caused the gap because it's kind of false price action. But with that said, this 15-minute order block is just coincidentally right where that session high is. So it's really good going, long story short. So I like that. So there's an alert coming back up towards that session high, an alert by that 4 hour order block, 4 hour 50 MA region, where we're looking for that higher high, higher low. Alternatively, if price comes up, we'll be looking to take price back down to that 4 hour 50 MA and into liquidity beyond it. And definitely good enough range in both directions to take US dollar weakness or strength in terms of getting us that move towards break even, if not take profits on those cross pairs. So I really like the DXY. I think it's shaping up really nicely. So that's what we have here. So I think the DXY, really easy to read. So I'm going to call that a nice pink to the right hand side there. So we'll start with the cross pair. GU. I've left the illustrations on just so you guys can see what we've done yesterday, but I certainly have updated my mindset. Again, we've just got those breaks of structures that we really wanted to see across the market coming from the session low. Here's a good example of using the order block as a result of a gap in the market. So, of course, we have a gap in the market, very slight one here on GU. But what I'm reluctant to do is, of course, use that order block because it's kind of false price action, right? But for a gap in the market, we may not have had that break of structure. So, what I'm looking to identify is, and when price comes back down towards these areas, I need to see something proven. I'm not going to trust this order block right away. I think the session low is still very much so a nice position to look to take a potential long on GU if we were looking to take GU. I still have my reservations with GU longs, and I'm more inclined to look at GU shorts, in all honesty. I like the short position a lot more. As we mentioned yesterday, that weekly candle last week's candle closure, if I can get my words out, closed beautifully below that weekly 50 MA. And what we're seeing now is a retest of that weekly 50 MA. We can see it just here if I move that along. And potentially we're looking to reject that weekly 50 MA for the week, pretty much straight out of the bat. Monday through to the end of the week, to be honest, because look where price action is. We're already in weekly rejection territory, which is now telling me if I want to be looking to take longs or shorts, I know the weekly 50 MA is already pretty much on side to look to short in line with the direction of the rejection of that. Let's say, for good example, if price doesn't cut, well, let's say price doesn't move further up and price comes back down, my mindset is now, well, we've already rejected that weekly 50 MA. So how much legs does price action really have to push right back into that weekly 50 MA again? Or is that just the rejection coming from that weekly 50 MA and price is now moving in my opinion, the better direction of travel based on price action? And then to add some more meat to the bones, my new saying of late is that the daily time frame, as I've started to say as well, over the course of the last few months, one line will often do it. And I've kept that line on the market because we can see price was holding above a certain area in the market. Last week, Thursday, we had that bearish close on the daily time frame. So we've definitely closed below a particular area in the market, meaning that we've now created a new low. After a low, what are we expecting? A lower high for a lower low continuation. So with that said, I definitely feel like the shorts have us trending in line with the higher time frames. With that said as well, we have the daily 50 MA on site. We've finally broken and closed below it. Now we're looking to retest it, just like on the weekly, lower low, lower high, back up into the area. There is also a daily order block in and around this area as well as a result of that bearish engulfing candle, looking to retest that area before then creating that lower high for the lower low continuation. And then as we look to the 4 hour time frame, we're looking at price action structure and everything put together. We're now supported short by the 4 hour 50 EMA and refined within the daily order block. We have the 4 hour order block right there up at the highs. Now, as I've mentioned previously, if I'm looking to teach, I would always suggest go for the highest order block there is possible when you're refining your areas down. And I don't want to deviate from that. However, when I'm seeing some reaction from a certain point in the market, what I'm wanting to do is, in fact, potentially at from some time. Hey, good morning, Boris. Hope you're doing well, my friend. Thanks for joining. What I'm looking to do from time to time, based on that lower time frame, is potentially look to stretch the order block. But with that doing, I now understand that within that order block, I still have two valid points of interest. So if you see what I've done there, we have this order block, of course, at the highs of the daily. So certainly we recognize we're on the correct side of the market. However, we have this 15-minute order block just here as well, which ordinarily I'd be looking to take the highest order block at all points in time. But with that said, if price now comes into this order block, let's say for good example, as it has, and then price then, as we say, one line from time to time will often do it. If price then breaks that low with this order block, then I'm almost going to be forced to use that 15-minute order block because it makes sense based on the weekly 50 MA, based on the fact this 15-minute order block is still refined within the daily. And the only reason why I'm not going to be looking to use it, let's say, is simply because the 4 hour order block hasn't been refined. But if my illustration, as we've mentioned, it's just an illustration, this is still an order block. It's just an order block that isn't the highest level of order block. So what I'll do, I'll still keep it the smallest order block for I suppose, teaching purposes. But what I am still going to be looking to do is if we do get a break of structure from this area, let's say coming into London, then of course I will look to use this 15-minute order block just here, perhaps if it aligns nicely with the DXY and look to take a short back down to session lows. So that's one trail of thought at the moment. I really like the shorts. And in terms of the long, it's not as if I hate the longs, but when I look to the left-hand side, I just really don't see where prices come into anywhere to really support me for a long position. And really that's pretty much that, to be honest with GU. The reason why I'll add to that is again, let's say if I was wrong with this order block and I would look to use an order block slightly higher, then we still haven't even come into that 4 hour order block down at these lows. So for me personally, price is just trending really nicely to the downside. Therefore, I want to be in line with trading with that kind of structure. Then, of course, if price comes down into this 4 hour order block, it would be the same kind of situation with this one where I'm refining a daily order block down at the lows on the daily time frame bottom right hand chart. And then what I'm looking to do is find a place in the market where there is potential for rejection towards the upside. With that then said, what I'd look to do is refine this order block down if there is rejection towards the upside, just like what we're talking about here. So that's why I'm reluctant to take the long position because, as I've mentioned, I just don't feel like there's anything there. And price hasn't even come into the daily order block. And one thing I'm not going to start doing is the same process, but on the daily time frame, because we're already refining from the daily. That's already a large enough area. We want to start making those areas smaller. And of course, by adding 4 hour order blocks in the middle, let's say, of nowhere, we then open ourselves up to a little bit more of, we can say, risk, because then we're giving ourselves more opportunities to take positions where technically they may not be there. But certainly in terms of the shorts, I like the shorts. So I'm willing to have a look at that 15-minute order block potentially. But what I would need to do is, of course, look for a break of structure from that area. With that said, if we do a quick comparison, I like doing this. So if we're looking for potential shorts coming out of GU, what do we need? We need DXY strength to come out of the market. So if we can have a look at the distance, let's say, to gain our best level of DXY strength coming out of the market. Oops, that's the wrong one. But have a look at the distance just here to the 15 or even to the 4. So that's the distance there. However, if we then look at GU in terms of where we need GU to go to take a good look in short, there's a couple of positions as we've disclosed. We've got this area in the market just here, or alternatively, we have this area slightly higher. So it's all making good sense. And I think really what I'm getting at is confirmation. There's no right to really look at this short position just yet. Of course, being a little bit more aggressive, you may want to put your structure point slightly higher. But in terms of looking at the basics of, let's say, higher highs and lows, higher highs, I call this the best structure point. Of course, looking at it at a more intricate level, then of course you can say higher high, higher low. And I guess you could just get away with calling that a higher high. So in your journal, of course, what you could be saying is, well, here is a structure point in the market, an aggressive structure point. You've waited for a break of that structure, come back into the point of interest, look for your entry criteria by way, let's say, of a bearish engulfing candle. Then you've got the order block, and then you'll be looking to take a short position in line with that. So again, I think GU looks really, really nice. I'll say in both directions, it's particularly based on the 15-minute time frame and that session low. But as I've said, I believe the short position is the better play based on a longer term thought process of the DXY. And that's pretty much that, to be honest. I think if the DXY comes into this 4 hour order block and looks to reject that 4 hour 50 MA, as we're seeing the rejection already, I think that looks for a very nice short position on GU. So that's what I've got thus far. I'll have a look at AU as well. Again, all the illustrations are on from yesterday, but just to show you that pretty much the forecast has gone up to plan. So AU, we've got a couple of conflicts with AU, but I still like it nonetheless. We've got the weekly order block to the highs, weekly order block to the lows, and then within those areas, we have a few daily order blocks that price is actually respecting. Now, what we said before on GU is putting in random order blocks. Now, the reason why this order block is in there is because the daily 50 MA is actually keeping price to the downside. We have this humongous bearish engulfing candle that took out, let's call it, a week's worth of price action. So I think this order block should be in the market for a valid reason. With that said, we are having a hold up of price. So what are we seeing? A bit of a range, in my opinion. However, as price looks to reject that daily 50 MA again, we kind of have to go with the overall sentiment of what's going on. We have the daily 50 MA of price rejecting to the downside, and the daily 50 MA is being rejected. Daily order block to the highs, that we're still yet to see a daily candle fully close above that area. So if you were to flip a coin and say, well, what's the probability in favor of? I'm always forget about the probability, just look at what's going on previously. If you were to look at potential shorts all week long and not look at long positions on AU, I think you'd be pretty all right. By just anticipation of the rejection of the daily 50 MA and waiting for a break of structure on the 15-minute time frame, you probably would have been all right. So that's what I've got so far. And with that said, it's all about the range, in my opinion, down to that weekly 50 MA. I understand, again, this could have been the test of the weekly 50 MA, but it's a new week. So therefore, what am I expecting? I'm expecting price to want to gravitate back down towards that weekly 50 MA before potential rejection towards the upside. With that said, I actually believe AU. What do I truly believe? I think AU is bearish, a higher time frame, because if we have a look to the left, prices come into that weekly order block, and then I think we're getting a nice reaction out of it initially. I understand that we've made a high, so higher low. Let me draw it for you to have a good look. So coming into the order block, there's a high, potential higher low, higher high, higher low. So we are searching for that higher high, but as a result of the daily 50 MA and daily price action, I think this could actually be the first low, followed by a pullback for a lower low. Even if price then rolls into the weekly 50 EMA and prints a daily candle or so below that weekly 50 EMA, that would be the lower low creation. Despite potentially rejecting the weekly 50 EMA on the weekly time frame, I think it would look quite nice on the daily time frame. And have a look at this. I think the daily, in my opinion, supports it quite nicely. So I recognize price action to the left-hand side. We certainly haven't broken below that. But in terms of the immediacy, what I'm seeing is this is a clear low in the market. So lower high, lower low, lower high, excuse me, lower low, lower high, rejection, daily 50 MA, looking for price to want to gravitate towards that weekly 50 MA. And then, as I said, if we get a daily candle closing below these areas, then that will be the lower low confirmed, and that would be us just rolling alongside the DXY in terms of synchronization and opposites of the DXY. So I quite like AU higher time frame, to be honest. I don't think it's the best, but you can see how it's starting to work out. With that said, my real thought process is coming from the 4 hour time frame. So the 4 hour was printing very, very nicely indeed. So we had higher highs and lows, higher high, looking for the higher low, followed by a potential higher high. Failed to do so. So again, that's why I believe that this could be the first low, a break of the 4 hour 50 MA for the first time. So this could be the first sign. After a low, what are we expecting? A lower high. We're now rejecting the daily 50 MA again for a potential lower low continuation. So again, it's just having a thought process. I could be completely wrong, and we could just look to gravitate back towards the lows of the range. That's one thought process, absolutely. However, with that said, I think based on the DXY, we could look at a slide on AU to the downside, which looking at the higher time frame picture on AU, I think that could be quite nice going, because this weekly order block, although it's an order block that's caused a push towards the upside, that push towards the upside didn't actually break structure to the left. So technically, this weekly order block, you could argue, is in the middle of nowhere. And actually, this weekly order block probably holds more weight than this one, because this weekly order block, look at the weekly bullish engulfing candle that came out of that area. So I'll be looking at price to really want to gravitate down towards this area longer term. So that's just my longer term thought process, really to help us looking for clues on the DXY. Because despite the DXY looking at potential short-term shorts, I think the DXY longer term is looking to go a lot higher. So with that said, I'm looking for potential short positions, much like GU. Let me bring up the 15 a little bit larger, and let me, in fact, move this daily. Let me take that off here. Current interview and above. Cool, that looks a bit cleaner, just a little bit. So with that said, of course, let's have a look at the bigger picture on AU, just to squeeze everything up and have a look to really see what's going on. So the first thing I'm going to ask rhetorically, does that look like a trending market? I'm going to say no. So the first thing I'm going to look to understand is we're probably in that higher time frame range that we already have a thought process of. So therefore, if I'm going to look at taking a potential short position on the range, first thing I need to see is a break of structure on that 15-minute time frame towards the downside. I think that would be fair to say. So I'm looking for price to come up towards those highs. Let me just double check, is that 15-minute order block available still? Because that would be a really nice place. Yeah, so there's a very large 15-minute order block up at those highs, And in fact, it's probably a lot smaller. So I'm giving price action a bit of a chance by allowing it to come higher. So let me place my alert, or rather lower. So I'm going to place my alert just below that 50-minute order block and allow price to come into that area. So what I'll be looking for a short position on AU, as a result of not really having a break below, I'd be a lot more aggressive if AU actually broke most recent lows from the area. However, it hasn't done that. So what I'll be looking to understand is as price starts to come up into that area, we can see it's printing quite nicely in terms of higher highs and higher lows. So I'm just going to look to identify that higher low, wait for that higher low to be broken to the downside, pull back, and then look for a short position right back down. I think that's a nice looking trade. As a result of having in the back of my mind that this could be a range, and the best way to not be, let's say, in inverted commas, be manipulated from the range is just wait for that. Because if you wait for that, you're not taking any aggressive trades. You save yourself those kind of positions where you enter aggressively, price whacks you out, then break structures to the downside. And you see it over and over again. As soon as price comes up, breaks through the range, price automatically, usually, just breaks right back in the range. As a result of that break in the range, you break structure to the left, coming back up by way of that higher low, and you leave an order block. And then you'll be looking to take that position when price comes right back up like so. Despite it actually breaking that 15-minute or the initial 15-minute order block, you still have the confluence that you're trading the range and you understand what's just happened in the range. This is general dynamics of the range where everyone's seeing this as a range, just like we are. Therefore, just hold on. We don't need to be the first, don't even need to be the second into that range. There's a good enough range back down towards that, even the 4 hour 50 MA, where to be honest, okay, I will manage my position by the 4 hour 50 MA, but being true, I don't really expect price to want to reject it if it is looking to respect the range. So my overall target, I mean, I'll say that now, but it would be very difficult for me not to close a 1 to 7 for good example. But I would expect price to actually roll all the way back down to the lows of the range. In line with that kind of format. So first target, of course, 4 hour 50 MA. If we're looking good, maybe I could close 75% of the trade off and just go for an ego trade for a 1 to 9, 1 to 10 type of thing. But I think the best thing to do would be the 4 hour 50 MA. So I like AU. I don't mind it. There's all good confidence for the short position, in my opinion. In terms of the long, do I like the long? Not really, I'll be honest. I don't like the long position. And that's really because the 4 hour is no longer trending towards the upside. Last week, if we were to say this price action to the right is no longer there, I think it looks a lot more attractive by looking at price making that high, expect the higher low for the higher high continuation. Prices come down into the lows and we're not making a new high. Therefore, if price comes back down to these lows, I don't really have any right to take it based on higher time directional trading. Of course, if we come slightly lower into the daily order block down here where we've got our refined areas, then it's a slightly different story. But taking the position at the moment from the session low, I'm not really interested. I like session highs and lows when they're in favor of price action, overall bias, if you understand what I mean. So let's say the session high was up at these highs and we're getting the bias in the direction of what we have now to the downside, then yeah, I'm very aggressive. That would be from a session high. Absolutely. But because I think we're against overall price action in terms of my own thought process, wanting price to come move towards the downside, particularly using the DXY, I think higher time frame, we're looking at DXY strength, then I'd be more aggressive in the short position. And I'd much prefer to take a higher low short than a session high short compared to a session low long at the moment. So it's looking all right. I'll consider a long, but it's very, very, very unlikely. In fact, I've given it a pink probably because of the short. So I like the short. Let's have a look at EU. Did I put alerts on there? Yeah, I did. So yeah, that's my only. In fact, let's put another alert just here as well for good measure to see what happens from that 15-minute order block. Yeah, so we've got that. EU. Apologies, team. I am under the weather again, but nothing will stop us. EU. Okay, what did we have last week with EU? So not a bad weekly closure. Again, if we were to look at a range on the weekly time frame, what we could stretch by saying is that certainly showed the intention. This weekly candle, previous weekly candle low, closed lower than the most recent weekly candle. So that is the intention for potential lower low, pullback for the lower high, followed by the lower low continuation. So in fact, EU so far, I really like EU. I think I've been liking EU for the majority of the last few weeks, to be honest. It's just how waiting for price to pull back to the areas. Look at the daily 50 MA. I'm not really seeing a cleaner daily 50 MA rejection for a very long time. Broken below, lower low, into the 50 EMA, lower low, 50 EMA, lower low, expecting price to come into the 50 EMA for a new lower low. Simple as that, with price action on side. As I said, not really interested in higher time price action in terms of trend, but when it's clear like that, you just have to take in consideration. And when you're journaling, you say, well, actually, I am clearly trading alongside higher time frame. So therefore, my shorts is, to be honest, where I want to be. With that said, we've got the daily 50 MA supporting shorts. But if you look at the 4 hour time frame, it seems like price is ages away from that daily 50 MA. And in the meantime, I'm not really seeing clean and clear 4 hour price action. I mean, you could argue it. You could say most recent price action, if we say it started from here, we now have a low in the market, potential lower high, lower low, potential lower high for a lower low. I understand that. However, I'm not even going to say however. I think that I believe that could well be the play. And I'm going to roll with that, in fact, because I'm not going to sit back and say everything's a range. At some point, I'm going to need to go for a position, I think, because I believe that the risk is well worth it, but potentially even that AU short that we spoke about as well. But EU, I think, has given a nice weekly sign. We've had a daily close below the, let's call it the range as well. Let's just move this slightly lower to prove the point. Yeah. I'm pretty confident that we have had a breakout of that range to the downside. So of course, lower low, looking for that lower high. And I like that price hasn't quite tapped into that 4 hour order block. So it's still giving us a nice opportunity to allow price to come back into that area. But with that said, we're getting a rejection. And this is what I mean by if my illustrations are wrong, does that make it right? It doesn't, that doesn't certainly doesn't make it wrong, but what it means that when I refine my areas down, I'm either going to need to add a 15-minute order block in there if it makes sense, i.e. to the left where we're getting a rejection from now, or wait for price action to break those break significant areas to prove an order block. So that's what I got on the 4 hour. I quite like the 4 hour, to be honest, in particular that closing below most recent lows. So when we go to the 15-minute, let's tie everything all together now. And really, my thought process again is gauged towards shorts. And I think it makes good sense. So this is a higher time frame illustration, lower low, potential lower high, and we're pretty much attacking it now. The reason why I was thinking to enlarge that 15-minute, or rather enlarge that 4 hour order block, is really because of this. So I've seen it earlier this morning and I didn't take a position, but I was tempted, I must admit. I really was tempted because if you enlarge that 4 hour order block, this 15-minute order block is most certainly within it. And what I was attempting to journal before I looked to take the position was, well, if we pushed up, we made a low. So this wasn't a low at this stage, but price then came up into this area and made a potential low from there. So I was really trying to micro analyze price action to really give me the right to take this short position that we had this morning. Believe it or not, I was up at that time to look at that short, but I thought, well, it's early doors Monday morning. There's no real rush. And as we start to say, one line will do it. So the best way, I believe, is now call that a structure point in the market. We have this gap where price is going to look to want to gravitate back down towards, And again, it's one of those where I'll probably have to split my risk and say, well, you know what? I'm happy to take a position from this area. It's proven itself. Once we break those lows, that area is now proven itself. Pull back up, may even add for the cherry on top of the cake, lower time frame, 1 minute break of structure, and look for that short position back down to that session low area, where still I would expect a reaction from it. But I believe if we're trading in the correct side of the market, and that 15-minute order block is the lower low, lower high for the lower low continuation, there's every right to expect this kind of move coming from the market. Because if you look at that 4 hour time frame, we are rejecting from the 4 hour order block. So if I was to enlarge that like so, you can see how this 15-minute order block now comes into play. So I'm going to put an alert just here of price crossing down. I'll put an alert of price coming back up. And I quite like that area, I must admit. Um, Failing that, of course, price would then have to come up to this high. There's no other 15-minute order block up at these highs, so I'd have to wait for one to be created if this area isn't respected. And to be honest, if this area isn't respected, I would probably leave price alone, because my thought process would be then we are going to be back into that range. As soon as we get a 4 hour candle close above this area, I believe we're just going to continue trending right back up to the upside. And then I'll be looking to take that nice position down from that daily 50 MA where price is respecting really, really nicely. And that's right up at here. So I really like both opportunities, or we'll call it all three opportunities. So really, it's just account preservation, because I recognize there are, let's say, two potential losses before what I would say as a nice position to take, and therefore I'd be looking for more of a structured entry criteria here. Well, no, I'm not going to be aggressive here. So if I flip that on its head, I'd be more aggressive up at these highs. Therefore, in and around here, I have to manage my risk a little bit better, because I recognize that the better areas up at these highs, we do have a little bit of reason to believe this could be the range. But with that said, it's difficult to say either way. So therefore, I'm probably going to go for all three positions, so long as I get that entry criteria, because I really like EU, and I think there's all good reason to have EU continue moving towards the downside. Even if you zoom out the 15-minute time frame, you can see where price was clearly being held at those lows, and then prices had that move to the downside, gravitating back up and then looking for the continuation short. So yeah, EU's a bit of a favorite for me, I must admit. I don't know if I'm being biased, but yeah, it's got a pink, and so does AU, to be fair. So I like them both. So I'm gonna have to make a decision at some point. So I think it's going to be a nice looking week, at least a nice looking Monday through to Thursday or Friday, Wednesday or Thursday, and I think it's looking pretty nice indeed. So GCAD, have a look at GCAD. GCAD's a bit of an annoying one. Um, we've had the move to the downside, didn't really manage to catch anything on the move down. We recognized after a high. Of course, we're expecting that higher low into the air for the higher high continuation. With that said, we're now there and price is already taking off. So actually, GCAT will probably get a nice promotion, because we're back into that weekly order block. As I said yesterday, weekly order block, because it's the only weekly order block available. Recognize it's not supported by the weekly 50 MA, but price action makes good sense for it to be there. Refine the area down daily. And then we had one close below that daily 50 MA, and then we had another close above it. And now price has retested that daily 50 MA already, and off it's gone. So I quite like that moving into the day, because essentially all that means is, well, Charles, all you need to wait for is a pullback entry criteria and look for the long. It's all pretty much there. I'm hoping that price doesn't take off too far into the 4 hour 50 MA. I want to have the range into the 4 hour 50 MA for management, at least towards probably take profit, in fairness. With that said, of course, with the slide coming down, absolutely we're going to see price action looking bearish, lower lows, lower highs, lower lows. So actually, we are searching for that lower high. We don't mind trading lower high extensions for the lower low, but we're actually trading out of a higher time frame point of interest. So I don't mind either way. I think in this element, I much prefer the longs. on GCAD based on that higher time frame type of position. And the daily 50 MA for me is certainly going to trump looking for a 4 hour 50 MA short. So with that 4 hour 50 MA short, what I mean is I don't have an order block here. So what I'm not going to do is put one in, but on a higher time frame, when I see that daily 50 MA, I'm looking left straight away to understand, does it make sense? So the only order block that, oh, where's my screen's gone? Uh, Okay, we're back. The only order block we have, if we were to say this is the leg extension, is very clearly up at those highs. So therefore, management is my 4 hour 50 MA, but based on my lower low, lower high type of formation, I think the price action should gravitate a lot higher. So I think GCAD, as we've set, as we can see, when it goes, it just goes and it doesn't really want to come back. So therefore, I'm going to be very aggressive on GCAD from a session low if it comes back. I'm gonna have a look at the 15 minute now to see if there's any order blocks available on the 15 for potential looking long position. So of course, we recognize if the 4 hour looks bearish, the 15 is going to look nice as well to the downside. However, at some point, we've got to understand we are breaking structure points to the left-hand side. So as you can see, I've had an area in the market, reluctant to take it before we've had that break. Of course, you guys know me, when price is doing nothing, I'll probably need to see a 4 hour bearish or bullish candle close above an area. So we've got that here. Price is then broken up into the high, potential higher low, higher highs and lows, higher high here, and then we've had a higher low for the higher high that's confirmed. So price is definitely on the way up. So the session low is still very much so in play. If it comes back down there, I'm looking for a 1 minute. In fact, that could well even be a limit order. If I'm at home, I'll be honest, I will look for a nice 1 minute break of structure or a 1 minute bullish engulfing candle, 1 minute order block, and then look for a limit off of that. So this same type of stuff, but just on a 1 minute time frame. So that's quite aggressive as well, as opposed just to take it as a limit order from if I'm home. I'm able to watch the 1 minute candles and just wait for that. If I'm not at home, I'll probably take the risk and look for a limit order when price gets down here. I just have to see how my day kind of works because I think with GCAD, if you get an opportunity for it to come back, it's just showing that it's probably going to just leave and off it goes. That's just my take of it of late. So I want to be on the back of that, to be honest. With that said, what looks good in terms of 15-minute price action and structure. So, of course, the most recent high has come from somewhere around this area. So I want to see, excuse me, if there are any order blocks around there. So it's unfortunate that this order block is just massive. Well, actually, it's probably not for GCAD. Let's have a look. Hmm. It's less than 20 pips, but with that said, where can I put my stop loss? I'd like to put my stop loss below these areas, so that's just impossible. So the order block is gonna have to stay on there because it is the only, let me double check myself. Nothing there, nothing, of course, nothing, nothing. That's been mitigated. So as price steps up, it is leaving those order blocks and they are being respected somewhat, and then we make the high. So what I'd want to do, let's see what we got in the 5 minute from that area. That's a lot better. So if we bring that a little bit smaller, there's a 5 minute order block there, and then just double back and see is there any. Oh, that's quite nice. Let's put that on the market. Come on, internet. Lower time frame. That will update in a moment. So that's 5. That's 15 and 5. Cool. So that gives us a little bit more wiggle room. Because what I'm looking to do is say, well, I won't take it from the 15-minute time frame, but I'll wait for price system come a little bit lower it within that 15 minutes. So you can see the comparison that we now have. Instead of waiting for taking a position from that large 15, we've got the 5 below. I'm not going to use the 1 minute just yet, but certainly the 5 minute, that could be a good looking position. Let's see if stop loss has changed somewhat. Yeah, but I think from because I'll be very aggressive down at the lows. we've already had the snap in the market. So what I'll be looking for, what would I look for here? So if I say 1 minute break of structure at a session low, so therefore from here, what I'll look for here on the 5 minute time frame is I'll say a 5 minute bullish engulfing, exactly the same, followed by 5 minute order block, followed by as soon as I get that, I'll set a limit order from that 5 minute order block and look to take price slightly higher. It's one of those, there's so many opportunities today that I'm gonna have to split my risk and understand that I do open myself up for a potential, let's say, a more, or well, it won't be a losing day. I'm just gonna have to split my 2.5% accordingly across the trade. So it's not too difficult. I mean, on the cross pairs such as EU, AU, and GU, I'm only gonna take one of those anyway. And then I guess the wild card would be GCAD towards the high. So I think if I use, let's say, for a good example, 0.75% on GCAD, and then I might have a look at EU, 0.5% per position on there. I think there was 2 to 3 positions short on EU that I like. So I'd still be well within my range for my daily loss. So I think it's good risks worth taking because price just looks really, really nice. So that's me for GCAD. And then with that said on GCAD, my targets are going to be so towards that 4 hour 50 MA first and foremost. We see this imbalance area. I can definitely manage my position by there. What I'll probably be looking to do is have a look at my stop loss, like so, to see if that makes sense. Yeah, I'd have my stop loss at 20 pips. I'll be honest, although I trust the position, I can just see these areas that price may want to look to gravitate down towards. Of course, a more riskier me would do something like that, but I think you've got good enough range to move to break even by that 50-minute order block. I'm not too bothered about that 50-minute order block anyway, but it's the 4 hour 50 MA that I am very bothered about. So if I can manage my position by the 4 hour 50 MA and then up at these highs again, this would be a bit of an ego booster trade up to those highs to see, well, let's say if EU is going good or GU or AU is going nicely, then I might just manage my position to break even at this point. In fact, definitely by this point, I'd be break even 4 hour 50 MA. Although I'm expecting a rejection, what I might do is just hold it and look to expand one of the positions and just understand, well, we could just reject the 4 hour 50 MA towards the downside. But with that said, there's no order block. So why would I expect that? I mean, there's a daily actually that I've definitely missed. And with the daily, hmm, yeah, I may have missed that actually. Okay, rewind. There's my take profit, 4 hour 50 MA. So that's GCAD there, team. I quite like GCAD. So that's GCAD longs, GCAD shorts. I'll be honest, although I see this order block here, I don't have the range to take a short position, and that's probably why I've missed it. Because here is a 4 hour order block. But then I have to ask myself, well, what am I expecting? I'm expecting price to reject the weekly order block, refine daily, refine full to the upside. So now that is one element. And then if I'm looking at price action to the opposite direction, yes, I have a daily order block here towards the downside as a result of Thursday's bearish engulfing candle. And then I have this 4 hour order block that would be refined within the daily. However, I don't have a weekly to then kind of match it. And then if I did, it would just be a no trading zone because I can't trade out of a weekly straight into trading short out of a weekly because I just won't have any range. So I'm gonna have to go with my overall thought process that the weekly is higher highs, higher lows, potential higher high. We are looking bullish, let's even call it on the daily, looking at a high, higher low for the higher high. And then the 4 hour time frame, of course, we're bearish coming into those areas. But look at the nice bullish reaction we're getting from that area. So I think in doubt, you trade in terms of the overall direction that you feel is price action is moving. And for me personally, looking at the weekly time frame, or I get it, the last two weekly candles were definitely bearish, but the overall price action of the weekly time frame is certainly pushing towards those highs. So therefore, I'd be happier taking the long position. Of course, it's open to interpretation. You could absolutely get rid of that weekly order block. You could put an order block in the short position and look to take short positions down. But with that said, you're then shorting directly into a daily 50 MA where price is already rejecting. So I think if you go the overall, GCAD longs, I think look quite appetizing. So pull back, and I'm definitely going to update you guys when I'm looking to execute that position. So what I'll do is bring this alert lower down. Remember, this is a 5 minute order block, therefore I'll be looking for a 5 minute bullish engulfing candle and price pull back into the imbalance before taking the long, and then down at these lows, session lows in particular. Let's face it, if price comes into this 50 is this 5 minute order block, I most certainly have enough stop loss coverage to cover my session low anyway. So I think the same applies from this 5 minute order block. I'll look for a 1 minute break of structure from that 5 minute order block, make sure my stop loss can cover the session lows, and I'll take an aggressive long position from there as well. So GCAD, I'm going to put that as a pink to be fair. I like GCAD. I don't know why it had an amber. Probably because of the two types of because of the range towards the downside. Because technically we are now longing into that 4 hour order block, but I don't believe that 4 hour order block caused the most recent low on the 4 hour time frame. So that is just putting in an order block because we're refining an area down on the daily. Um, yeah, I like GCAD. Let me know after you've listened to it what you think. Don't know if Boris you're able to unmute yourself, but would you be shorting or going for the long on GCAD? I think the longs look quite nice, to be fair. Now, US dollar CAD, this could act in favor of GCAD because if US dollar CAD moves to the downside, GCAD should move towards the upside. US dollar CAD rejecting that weekly order block to the downside. So, what am I looking for on wait, let me double check that. Yeah. So what am I looking for on UCAD? So we've had that high. We've come into the an area where we place the market. We've had the rejection from it. Daily 50 MA supporting price towards the upside. I'm looking for what we've got just a nice looking trading range to be fair. With that said, on UCAT, we have two weekly order blocks where we could look for price to actually gravitate towards. And then within those weekly order blocks, we have daily order blocks as well. It's just looking like a really nice trading range. This daily order block, I admit, was a random order block supported by the daily 50 MA towards the upside. And then we've had that bullish reaction coming out of that area. So it looks quite nice, to be fair, in terms of trading from it. However, I think we're bang in the middle of daily order block here. And why am I seeing a white line? That's a previous daily order block, it must be. I'm gonna have to make that smaller because that's confusing me. 2 seconds. Okay, cool. Cool. So we have the only daily order block available up at these highs, and we've got this daily order block down at this low. So it's a nice trading range. And the 4 hour, let's see how this is gonna shape our mindset. So I'm looking for longs on GCAD, and the opposing should happen on UCAD, apparently, depending on if the market wants to play ball or not. 4 hour time frame. What do I have? What can I clearly see? I think the 4 hour, we've certainly made a low in the market, looking for a potential lower high for a lower low continuation, perhaps. That's one thought process. We could then say, well, I think that's the best thought process, to be honest. Alternatively, what else can we say? We could say we've come out of that weekly order block, we've made a low. Yeah, I think that's the better play or the more sensible play. We've come out of that weekly order block first and foremost. Wick, 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 bearish engulfing. We've now retesting that wick imbalance, or rather the imbalance on the weekly for potential rollover back down to the weekly 50 MA. So I think the better play on US dollar CAD is shorts. Does that really make sense? Hmm. Well, let's see if it does make sense even for a trade anyway. So price action is not the cleanest, but in terms of looking for a short position, I don't think we're anywhere near looking for a short position just yet anyway on UCAD. So let me clear some of these charts up just like so for us. So if I'm looking to take a short position, I'm going to refine this daily order block down into the four. We've got that already, and we're all the way up here. I don't personally think anything else can be done by way of short positions in the immediacy for UCAD. I'm just zooming out that 15 to have a look at the overall picture on the 15-minute time frame. So in fact, what we've done, we've made in clear lower lows. At an intraday perspective, we're making those lower highs. And then we're looking for long positions back up to potentially from that potential session low. So I don't mind that. However, a short position from there, I believe, would make more sense. A long position from these lows would make good sense as well, considering there's the high, potential higher low, higher high continuation. Let's just have a look again on the 15, what we have. So have I made a new high? Yes, I have. That's definitely a break of structure just about there. Just about. So that brings in this 15-minute order block. Okay, I've had it, it's been used. So the session low again is the only looking play for me with UCAD. Now, I actually think UCAD longs from that session low could be a quite a nice position despite what I've just said. Because if we start to use the DXY, bring the DXY into the thought process, if the DXY is looking to, let's say, reject if it loads, this potential area down here towards the upside, I'm looking here by the way, then we'd be expecting US dollar to move towards the upside. And I believe if you're looking at that in terms of where could UCAD pull back to, I think if the DXY pulls back to its area, I think here is going to be where UCAD's going to reject from. Not so much here. I think that would be too much movement on UCAD. So then I'll be looking at this potential session low for, let's call it a potential long position. We just double check the 4 hour time frame. There's not a lot in terms of help from the 4 hour 50 MA, but certainly the daily 50 MA from this area makes sense. So it is tricky from this session though. You don't really have any EMA support at all. So your overall bias is going to be the DXY looking for a reaction. So I'll be onto the DXY to see what type of reaction I'm going to get. Also, with that said, this was previous price action. So when price gets down to that session low, you know what I need to see at least. It's going to be a bullish engulfing because we don't have a 15-minute order block. That bullish engulfing is going to give me the order block, and then I'll start to manipulate that 15-minute imbalance when price returns back down to it. However, with that said, the DXY is going to have to hold that area really, really well, which I believe it really should if we don't roll back into the range. So UCAD, actually, I'm going to give it a green towards the upside. I quite like UCAD. So with that said, then GCAD longs. Does that make sense? Hmm. I'll still say yes at the moment, but it doesn't. So potentially GCAD. Well, to be honest, GCAD looks more so as if it's going to push towards those highs for a move towards the downside anyway, before we're actually looking to retest those lows. But let's have a look what happens here when the alerts go off. It's then time for us to really reanalyze the charts to see what's going to go on. I'll just double check the correlation between GCAD and UCAD. For some reason, it's slipping me to double check that. However, US 30 should be a good gauge because what we're seeing is when the DXY moves to the downside, US 30 moves towards the upside. So let's have a look there. Trading US 30, don't mind it at all. I think it's quite a good looking pair to trade or index to trade. Up at the highs, however, there's not too much at all for us to start building our bias by. Nothing at all on the weekly time frame. And I don't really want to have to be scrolling back into 1994 to look for a weekly order block. And I probably won't because US 30 just continues to move towards the upside year on year anyway. So every new move to the high is just a new high. So looking at taking shorts are only pullbacks anyway. With that said, where's my daily 50 MA gone? Let's put it back in the chart to keep it nice and uniform. Here we are, daily 50 MA. Cool. So, have we rejected the daily 50 MA and moving towards the upside already? Potentially. However, we've got a daily order block in the market as a result of that bearish candle just here left us with this daily order block to the left. Therefore, I want to see price reject that area. We had a nice rejection and we closed above. So I was going to say we had a rejection of the 4 hour 50 MA, which we didn't. We closed above, rejected it initially, but we closed above, and the next candle's already open, closing above that. However, this 4 hour order block's holding quite nicely, so let's see if we reject it to the downside and we just leave a nice wick to the high, and then we get that nice bearish candle closure back below the 4 hour 50 MA. That in itself will break some nice structure points to the downside for us. And I wouldn't mind that type of position at all. With that said, I think the 4 hour looks very, very nice in terms of most recent structures. Structure point in the market, maybe a clue for the break. This certainly was the indication. Low, lower high, lower low, back into the 4 hour 50 EMA, 4 hour order block for a potential rollover to the downside. So that's my thought process at the moment. Now, we're in session high territory. I like that a lot. But with that said, I like this even better. Session high with a 15-minute order block just above. So the reason why I like that is other traders going to see the session high as just a clear support and resistance type of trade. We can definitely understand why, based on our order block selection, why price action may not want to respect that session high, push into that 15-minute order block, give us that bearish engulfing 15-minute pullback, and I'll be looking for the short position down. The reason for that thought process is because if I short from this session high, I don't have enough range to that 4 hour 50 MA where price is looking to reject already. I just don't have it. However, in comparison, if I short from the 15-minute order block with the same stop loss, let's say 101, let's say 10 there. Now I do have more of a range down to the 4 hour 50 MA where currently I'll be forced to manage that position by that. Of course, better play. You sit patiently, wait for a 4 hour bearish candle to close back below that 4 hour 50 EMA. What that will probably be is definite structural breaks to the lows on the 15-minute time frame. And you just wait for price to pull back into the imbalance that caused that break of structure and then look to trade alongside the trend. So I think US 30 looks quite nice for short positions. The longs at the moment, until I get a bullish candle close above that daily order block on the daily time frame, I will probably keep looking for the short position. And with that 4 hour time frame as well, I think the 4 hour looks really good in terms of continued short. And that I think concludes it. So in terms of my all my alerts, what am I going to do? So I'm going to have a structure point just here. So nothing in the immediacy from the session low, just to expand, unless London then opens and we get that. With that then said, I want to be using the order block that caused that break of structure if there is one there. If we don't get that break of structure, then I'm expecting price want to gravitate back up towards this 15-minute order block, where then I'll be looking for a bearish 15-minute engulfing candle. And I'll look for that lower time frame break of structure, and then I'll definitely look to short US 30, managing by the 4 hour 50 EMA. And what I do like, we still have Asia available to be filled to these lows. So I really like that. And with that said, waiting for price to pull up here, we're only going to fill this Asia that's available to the left. So let me pop an alert just slightly higher as well. So I think that's well prepared. We just go through while we're here, double check all the alerts are in the correct place. You guys can have a look where I've got them. So crossing down, moving back up, that's nice. GU, no alerts just there. I like the shorts on GU. So let's have an alert of price crossing down just in case we get a break of structure and crossing back up all the way back up here. That's nice. That's all I need for GU. AU, again, I prefer the short position. Alerts there, alerts there. Let's see if we break some structure points. EU, that alert's in the market. Break of structure, that's alert is in the market. Nice. GCAD. GCAD, here we are, GCAD. Come back to the 5 minute order block, 5 minute engulfing alert, and then back up to those highs if we break structure point. In fact, let's put that there. UCAD. Okay, so I wasn't completely sleeping. UCAD up at the highs. That's there. Let's go down at this low. And if we break the most recent high, and then US 30. We've already done that. While I'm here, let's just check what we have in terms of news, and then I will conclude the video for us all. Okay, if it's gonna load. Okay, today's the 27th. So what do we have? Not too much. Not too much at all. That's definitely a doable type of day. Nothing that's really sticking out. Durable, durable. No, I think that's a fairly decent day compared to other days that we have where it's just completely red from start till finish. Yeah, I think that's a nice, decent day ahead, perhaps. So, Boris, thank you as always for joining, my friend. I hope you're still
Of course,
gaining.
thank you.
No sweat at all, my friend. Wish you a good trading day. I'll be active,
The
team.
same.
Yeah, good stuff. I don't think I'm gonna be flying today, so I'm going to be just watching to see those areas go off, to be honest. And when they do, I'll update you guys accordingly. Boris, take care, my friend. Always good to have you join me in the morning. All the best, everyone. I hope the recordings are helping. Take care, and I'll speak to you tomorrow, and if not later. All the best. Cheerio.